Greetings, everybody. Full disclosure, this is my third attempt at making this video. And perhaps if this is the one that makes it to the internet, you'll understand what I'm talking about. Keep in mind, these videos are done with the intent of attempting to stimulate conversation, especially if we differ on ideas and viewpoints, is to maybe stimulate conversation to see if we can come together and converse with one another versus draw lines in the sand and lob insults at one another, because eventually it will eventually turn from words to something else. So I'm just trying to create discourse. I typically do stuff that is socio-politically relevant. Every once in a while, I'll do something different with the entire intention of trying to stimulate a conversation. For the most part, it's the same shit, different day in the news cycle. Sometimes it changes, but a lot of the themes remain the same. In that vein, I think it was last week or maybe the week before, I posted a video and I briefly mentioned how the Department of Justice and the FBI have been directed to focus some of their attention on parents who are openly disagreeing with school boards. So let's get something clear. I utterly disagree. If that's the case, and if that's 100% fact, I completely and utterly disagree with the fact that the FBI and the Department of Justice allocating any kind of resources at disgruntled parents under the pretense that they're considered domestic terrorists. I do think that there is a way better allocation of time, resources, and more specifically money. Then there's the pretense. First and foremost, anybody who's an elected official, from the president to the Senate to the Congress to any elected position, they are elected by votes. All right. Now, I'm not going to go into this diatribe of electoral college, popular votes, etc. The point is, we elect them to represent us, to serve us. Okay. And the unfortunate truth is, there are winners and there are losers. Okay. In which case, if you're a hardcore Republican or a hardcore Democrat, if you're being represented by a Democrat or a Republican, you're either a winner or you're a loser. If you're somewhere in between, then we're all kind of losers at that point. With that being said, there's been a lot of discussion, some of which is, do parents have the ability to disagree with what their kids are being taught in a public school system? I have some mixed thoughts on that. You see, if you really want to execute control over what your kids are taught, you can either homeschool them or put them in a private school. Once you give them up to private school, you sort of have to give up a certain amount of control. Now, you can actively participate in school board meetings and let your opinions, thoughts, and feelings be known. Okay? School board members are elected officials. They're not omnipotent. They're not monarchs. They're elected, which means they can also be recalled. You can recall anybody who's elected can be recalled. All right? Or you can just vote them out during the next election cycle. That being said, school board officials need to understand and appreciate their position. They're not godlike. They're not omnipotent. They serve at the request of voters. Okay, so they serve the voters. Where the school board gets off on demanding assistance from the DOJ and the FBI, I think is a gross overreach by a group of school board members who are excessively on the left, excessively liberal, and excessively progressive. Traditional progressive, traditional liberal, I don't think there's a problem with. It's the excess. Because excess knows no limitation. Excess knows no boundary. All right? So if you want to look at it in the simplest terms, right? A hardcore righty will not have a glass of wine with dinner. A conservative will have a glass of wine with dinner. A liberal and a progressive may have a glass or two with dinner. A hardcore lefty, hardcore liberal, hardcore progressive will have an entire bottle of wine. We already know that there are tons of issues related from having an entire bottle of wine with dinner. And that's the simplest way I know how to put it. But the simple fact that they're so hardcore left, so hardcore, excessively liberal and progressive, that they're soliciting assistance from the DOJ and the FBI and trying to label parents who disagree with them as some sort of domestic terrorist, I think is a woefully ignorant thing to do, and a tremendous overreach of any kind of elected authority you might have. With that being said, some of this is stemming from a recent development in Loudoun County, Virginia. Part of the reason this is the third attempt at making this video is the subject material gets me awfully fired up, and I'll explain here in a moment. A father was arrested at a Loudoun County, Virginia school board meeting for reasons I'm not entirely familiar with. I imagine disturbing the peace, maybe. Here's the shortest version I can come up with, all right? Because I'm going to try to keep this within 20 minutes or less. This gentleman, his daughter, was raped inside of the bathroom at the local school. A boy put on a skirt, walked into the girl's bathroom, and then forced himself upon her and forced her to do things. So the easy assumptions are that she felt in a position where she lacked any kind of resistance and she lacked any kind of ability to object and say no, and therefore she felt overpowered, overwilled, whatever the case may be, and either did what she was told to do or she was raped. Here's the thing. She's a freshman in high school. He's possibly older, and they're minors. So I don't think we need to know the full details. All we need to know is she was unwilling, she was forced, it was unconsensual. Now, the father disagrees with the school board because between the school board and the prosecution for that county, they were trying to handle it internally versus allowing the actual justice system to take place. Even though the assailant may be a juvenile, all right, it's still rape or sexual assault. It's still wrong. But because this county may be attempting to cater to and pacify a present-day social trend, a present-day socio-political issue, because there's the assumption that this boy is gender fluid because he wore a skirt in order to enter the girl's bathroom, it's a tremendously delicate issue. Now, to give you some context, it's being treated in a very similar fashion that for people my age are familiar with from television and the movies. Whether it's a superstar athlete or whether it's a rich kid attempting to cover it up because it's the athlete and what the athlete can do for the school, or it's the rich kid and what the rich kid's parents can do with their power and authority. So in this case, the kid in question, I haven't heard anything about him being a star athlete, and I haven't heard anything about him being rich. Just that he's gender fluid. I completely disagree with him being gender fluid because if you're forcing yourself on a heterosexual girl and you're basically sexually assaulting her, there's no gender confusion there. You know exactly who you are. You know exactly what you are. All right? I don't also believe in gender fluidity. You can disagree with me backwards and forwards. You can call me all sorts of names. The bottom line is I believe in gay, bisexual, and heterosexual. All right? I believe in that. I believe in gender dysmorphia. I believe this boy is none of the above. I believe this boy took advantage of a social trend in order to gain access into a gender-exclusive bathroom where he could have his way with a young girl. All right? As a father of a teenage daughter, I have a problem with this. As a human being, I have a problem with this. We can discuss it. I'm not going to try to cover every basis, and I'm not going to have a 15-minute long diatribe over a 30-second conversation just so that I can try to defend my basis, all right? I am who I am, and I'm going to own it. I utterly disagree with this. What I find more disheartening is how this was flip-flopped and or used as a platform to springboard off of on a completely separate and different issue. I completely and utterly disagree with how the school board, how the school, and how the local law enforcement is handling the situation because of the proposed concept of gender fluidity. I don't believe there's any gender fluidity to be discussed here, okay? I don't believe this has anything to do with a social trend. I firmly believe that he took advantage of an existing trend to gain entry and to gain access. But because they're trying to treat this with kid gloves and they're trying to treat this delicately, this father disapproves because he's not seeing what he believes would be ordinary justice for his daughter. And instead, for his efforts, I'm assuming he may have gotten a bit worked up, a bit emotional, which I think any parent, regardless of father or mother, would. I think anybody in their right mind would get worked up if you're attempting to silence the situation, if you're attempting to treat it as anything other than what it was, which is sexual assault and or rape, regardless of what sort of special loophole category the assailant is trying to qualify for in order to lessen or get out of punishment. That's where I stand on this whole issue. And it got me quite worked up, and the first two iterations of this video, aside from my language, I'm pretty charged up about it. And the topic, I think, deserves a little bit of attention because if you remove all of that other subtext, the gender fluidity, the skirt, and what you have is another student sexually assaulting another student. It's just wrong. I don't care if it was boy on boy, girl on girl, girl on boy, boy on girl. A sexual assault was committed. All right? Involuntary sexual acts were forced upon somebody else. It's just wrong. It was unconsensual, it was unwilling, it's wrong, and therefore it should be subject to being dealt with accordingly. Just because the assailant is attempting to take advantage of some sort of social trend or whatever you want to call it, we can disagree on that all day long. I don't believe that should curry any special favor, and that should curry him any kind of special treatment. And if that's what the father was disagreeing with, I wholeheartedly agree. And if the left was attempting to take this concept to embellish it and make it bigger than what it was for the sole purpose of basically getting their way, guaranteeing that they can get their way because they can gaslight and they can ostracize any parents who disagree with their agenda, then I think that's a sad state of affairs. And at some point, when words fail, it's going to have to turn to actions. If you disagree, let's at least try to use our words first. Okay, get involved. Leave a comment, whether Facebook, Instagram, YouTube. Leave a comment. Because mark my words, if this continues to happen, if the left continues to try and find ways to create excess and push boundaries, eventually words are going to fail, actions will be necessary, and for those of us who may or may not disagree on a topic, we may find ourselves taking actions. In which case, what? Are we going to have the purge? The purge will go from being a movie to real life? Are we going to have a second civil war? Are we going to have micro civil disobedience? I mean, look at what's happening in Seattle and Oregon, all right? You want that in your streets? You want that in your neighborhoods? Just a thought. So that's where I stand on this issue, is that it's wrong no matter what, and it should be treated accordingly, and it should not be treated with kid gloves just because at this present time it's a modern social trend that this young boy is trying to take advantage of to do what he did. But you know the deal. If you know me in person and you want to comment, so be it. Otherwise, you can comment on Facebook, Instagram, or YouTube. You can like, subscribe, hit the bell, whatever the case may be. But I think for stuff like this, we definitely need to have conversations. I don't care if you're a parent or not. All right, if you want to have this conversation, we can have this conversation. Just keep in mind, we're under no obligation to agree. We're under no obligation to try to find middle ground. It's just conversation. All right? And that's really all I have. I mean, I apologize for stammering a little bit here and there. It's just, I think it's a pretty emotionally charged subject, and I don't even think the LGBT squared triangle hypotenuse organization can defend this one. All right, because otherwise the message you're sending is it's only rape or sexual assault if it's hetero on hetero. But once you involve the rainbow flag or invoke the rainbow flag, then everything's okay. And I don't believe in that. I don't care what flag you're under, rainbow, magenta, whatever the fuck it is. Laws are laws. So let me know what you think.